All right, all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa, Baruch, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. All praises to the Almighty Yah. Hallelujah. All right, you are live and direct once again with your Akazaki Yahoo, and we are back for another video review with AOY. Indeed, the name of this video, if you black, you need to watch this. The Black Men Who Terrified the KLAN, brought to us by our good brothers over at Black Culture Unlocked. I think they got a gem here. We're going to get to it and get through it. Here we go.
Klansmen for Mississippi!
Mississippi!
Klansmen for America!
For America!
For generations, the Ku Klux Klan cast a shadow of terror across America. Hooded figures gathered in the dead of night to burn crosses and ride under the cover of darkness, menacing Black communities with violence and intimidation. The Klan wanted Black Americans to live in fear, but throughout history, there have been those who refused to bow. Brave Black men stood up, armed themselves with courage and conviction, and faced the Klan head-on. In doing so, they turned the tables and made the white-robed terrorists feel fear for a change. This is the story of the Black men who terrified the Klan. From the Reconstruction era through the Civil Rights Movement, we will explore 5 extraordinary stories of resistance. These are tales of men who wouldn't be intimidated, men who protected their families and communities when law and justice would not. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the stories they don't want us to remember. Our first story takes us to the small coastal town of Darien, Georgia, at the close of the 19th century. This was deep Jim Crow country, where a rumor against a Black man could set deadly events in motion. In the summer of 1899, a Black landowner named Henry Delegal was accused of raping a white woman. He was known among Black residents as a steady family man. In that era, an accusation like this often ended at a tree or a courthouse yard without a trial. Lynch mobs formed quickly. Local officials often looked away. The Ku Klux Klan and allied groups used accusations to enforce a racial order that kept Black people afraid and silent. Darien was not willing to follow the script. The Black community had watched wave after wave of violence across Georgia and the South. Newspapers recorded the deaths with cold regularity. Churches mourned. Families buried sons and brothers. In Darien, anger hardened into resolve. The law did not protect Black life with any consistency. The men of the town decided they would. Word spread that a white crowd planned to seize Delegal from the jail and hang him before dawn. Black men gathered at the jail in numbers. Many had learned to shoot as boys. Some had served in local militias that existed before the new regime crushed them. They took up positions inside and outside the building. They kept rifles and shotguns within reach. They spoke in low voices and checked the corners and windows. They killed the nearby lamps with well-placed shots, leaving the jail in darkness and the street exposed to the moon and to any torch a man chose to carry. It was a simple, tactical choice that gave them a small edge. They understood what was coming. Night settled on the river town. A white crowd approached in the heat, loud and restless. The sound carried down the street. The mob wanted a quick punishment that skipped a judge and a jury. As the men came close, they saw Black defenders on the steps and along the walls. Gunmetal showed where the light caught it. A shot cracked the air as a warning. The crowd halted. A few tried to press forward anyway, but others pulled them back. The people advancing on the jail had counted on fear to clear their path. The sight of armed Black men holding ground forced them to think about a cost they had not planned to pay. The standoff stretched. There were shouts and threats from the edge of the light. Inside the jail and along its exterior, the men from Darien waited and watched. They were not playing at war. Each man knew what would happen if the crowd broke through. They also knew what it would mean if they held the line. The mood shifted in the street. The mob had to decide whether to risk a gunfight in the dark against men who knew the doorways and alleys. Officials realized the situation could spiral. Appeals went up the chain to the governor. State troops arrived within days. The militia moved to Project Control. Their focus fell on the black community that had organized the defense. The point, from the state's view, was to restore quiet and to show that armed black resistance would not be tolerated. Arrests followed. Houses were searched. In the chaos of that week, a deputy sheriff entered the illegal home. A struggle broke out. A shot was fired. The deputy died. One of Henry's sons was accused of firing the fatal shot. That set a new series of charges in motion. Even with troops in the streets and fear running through homes, the community's decision to defend Henry changed the path of the case. He did not end up on a rope. He lived to face a jury. That fact was rare for a black man in Georgia accused of a crime against a white woman. Lawyers petitioned to move the trial out of the immediate county. They sought a place where the jury pool might listen to evidence rather than follow the rage of the moment. The hearing stretched over days. Reporters took notes. Families waited outside the courthouse. When the verdict came, it defied most expectations of the time. The jury acquitted Henry Delagle of the rape charge. The court did not find proof that rose to the level of guilt. Henry walked out a free man. The story did not end in celebration. The state still demanded a price for the death of its deputy. Henry's son stood trial for murder. A jury convicted him. The sentence was prison, not a killing in the street or a hangman's knot behind a courthouse. That outcome carried its own bitter truth. A white jury would not clear the entire DeLegal family after a week that included an armed stand at a jail and the death of an officer. Yet the difference between a cell and a tree mattered. It meant the state had to own its decision in public view rather than allow a mob to act in secret. The day Black Darien stood up to the Klan reverberated beyond this small town. White newspapers angrily dubbed it an insurrection, and Georgia's authorities made a show of quelling it. But the fact could not be erased. A black community had successfully protected one of its own from lynching. It was a rare and remarkable victory. Indeed, in the aftermath of this showdown, the coastal region around Darien would record fewer lynchings than perhaps any other part of Georgia. The would-be night riders had learned that in this community, their terror would be met with equal resolve. Their defiance in 1899 lit a spark, a warning that would echo in history and inspire future generations of Black Americans to stand up against the Klan's tyranny. Darien's victory was just the beginning. Fast forward to 1946, and another showdown was brewing in the town of Columbia, Tennessee. World War II had ended just months before. Black soldiers had returned home after fighting fascism overseas, determined to claim the dignity and rights they had earned in uniform. But the Jim Crow South was unwilling to change. The Ku Klux Klan was still active, and violence against black veterans was alarmingly common. Not long before the events in Columbia, a black veteran named Isaac Woodard had been beaten and blinded by police in South Carolina for asserting his rights in public. Tension hung thick in the post-war air. Black men were less inclined to accept the same old insults, and white supremacists were intent on reminding them of the racial hierarchy. In Columbia, the spark came on February 25, 1946, from what began as a simple errand at a department store. A 19-year-old Black Navy veteran named James Stevenson accompanied his mother, Gladys, to a shop to retrieve a radio that had been serviced. Instead, they were told the radio had been sold to another customer. When Mrs. Stevenson pressed for its return, William Fleming Jr., a white store employee, confronted her with hostility. James stepped in to protect his mother, and a fight broke out. In the struggle, he hurled the clerk through a plate glass window. The sight of a black man striking a white man in Tennessee in 1946 ignited a surge of outrage that spread quickly through town. police arrested James and his mother, charging them with disturbing the peace. Both pled guilty and paid a fine. Yet the matter escalated when the clerk's father swore out new warrants accusing James of assault with intent to kill. As the story spread, distorted with each retelling, local white anger swelled. By evening, a crowd gathered at the Maury County Courthouse, muttering about punishing the Stevensons and others in their community. The conditions for a lynching or an attack on the Black District were set. Columbia's Black residents, especially its veterans, prepared themselves. They knew what usually followed when white crowds gathered in anger. In the segregated district known as Mink Slide, the center of Black business life, men began to mobilize. Many were veterans who had served in Europe and the Pacific, trained in firearms and tactics. They armed themselves and organized defenses. They were determined not to let Columbia become another site of unchecked violence. As night fell, the courthouse square filled with white men, some Klansmen and others locals carried along by the fury. In Mink Slide, Black defenders positioned themselves on rooftops and inside shop fronts. To deny attackers an advantage, they shot out the street lights. They knew their neighborhood, and the white mob did not. The men steadied their weapons and prepared for the inevitable clash. After midnight, Columbia's police chief sent 4 white patrolmen into Mink Slide. Their task was to investigate reports of armed men and to test the defenses. As they neared the edge of the district, gunfire erupted. Shots flashed from darkened windows and alleys. The 4 officers were hit and wounded, scrambling back to safety while their patrol cars were left riddled with bullets. For the first time in living memory in the South, Black citizens had organized armed resistance that bested white officers in a direct confrontation. The courthouse crowd erupted in anger and alarm. What had begun as a march toward another act of racial terror now looked more like the opening of a battle. The next day, Tennessee's governor dispatched highway patrolmen and National Guard to Columbia. They surrounded Mink Slide and stormed through homes and shops, seizing weapons and arresting over 100 Black residents. 2 veterans, James Johnson and William Gordon, died in custody under suspicious circumstances. Officials claimed they tried to seize weapons and escape, but many in Columbia doubted the story. The sweep was indiscriminate, punishing the entire community for daring to defend itself. Even amid the crackdown, one fact stood out. Columbia's Black community had met the threat and had kept their neighborhood from being overrun by a white mob. What followed was a legal battle that drew national attention. The NAACP, led by Thurgood Marshall, sent a team to ensure the defendants had proper representation. The trial of 25 Black men charged with attempted murder was moved to another county. Evidence was presented, witnesses were called, and arguments filled the courtroom. On October 4, 1946, the verdicts came down. An all-white jury acquitted most of the defendants, convicting only 2, and those convictions were later overturned. The result shocked many in the state. Some speculated that the outside defense team had raised too many questions, others that the jury was unwilling to endorse the reckless actions of Columbia's leaders. Whatever the reason, the outcome showed that armed resistance could alter not only events on the ground, but also the course of justice in the courtroom. The Battle of Columbia, as newspapers called it, became a turning point. It signaled a new mood among Black veterans and their communities. Men who had fought overseas would not automatically submit to terror once they came home. White supremacists, including the KLAN, were forced to see that in some places they would be met with gunfire rather than silence. Columbia foreshadowed a new phase in the struggle for civil rights. The KLAN had intended to intimidate, but instead it was the KLAN and its allies who discovered that a generation of Black Americans, hardened by war and weary of injustice, would stand their ground. Columbia's stand in 1946 sent ripples across the South and marked the beginning of an era when the old order could no longer count on absolute submission. Our third story takes place in Monroe, North Carolina, a small town that became an unlikely battleground for black self-defense in the 1950s. At the center of the story is Robert F. Williams, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and a daring leader who made the Ku Klux Klan think twice about ever coming to Monroe again. In the mid-1950s, Monroe's black residents were under siege. Klan members drove through black neighborhoods at night in caravans of cars, firing guns into homes, tossing burning crosses onto lawns, and shouting threats. Local police often stood aside or even escorted these night riders, leaving the black community with no protection. Williams, as the president of the Monroe NAACP chapter, decided that his community would no longer suffer in silence. If the law would not defend black citizens, then black citizens would defend themselves. Robert Williams was not inclined to submissiveness. He had seen too much hatred and hypocrisy. As a child, he had witnessed a white police officer beat a black woman senseless, an image seared into his mind. After serving his country in uniform, Williams returned to find that service had earned him no respect from Jim Crow. He turned instead to the lessons of his own heritage. Since Reconstruction, black Southerners had sometimes survived by keeping firearms close at hand. In 1956, Williams took a bold step. He obtained a charter from the National Rifle Association to establish the Black Armed Guard in Monroe. On paper, it was a rifle club, but in practice it was a disciplined group of black men, many of them veterans, who pledged to protect their community from violence. Williams secured firearms, including high-powered rifles, and the men drilled in preparation for the next wave of Klan terror. The first major test of Williams's ideas had come years earlier, in 1947. A black resident of Monroe named Benny Montgomery had been executed by the state for killing his white employer in a fight over wages. After the execution, Klansmen threatened to snatch Montgomery's body from the funeral home and drag it through the streets as a warning to the black community. Williams and others in the Monroe NAACP were determined to stop it. They organized an armed guard at the funeral parlor. When a line of Klan vehicles crept up with their lights out, they were met by the sight of dozens of rifles aimed directly at them. The Klansmen fled before a shot had to be fired. That night taught Williams that collective self-defense was not only possible, but effective. Convinced by the lesson, he began shaping the Black Armed Guard into a reliable force, acquiring better weapons and organizing the men for coordinated action. By the summer of 1957, Monroe's racial tensions were boiling over. The local NAACP was pushing for desegregation of public spaces, including a swimming pool. The Klan responded with open hostility. Crosses burned. Rallies drew thousands of white supremacists from across the state. The atmosphere grew more menacing by the week. Emboldened by their numbers and secure in the knowledge that local police would not interfere, the Klan planned an attack. Their chosen target was the home of Dr. Albert Perry, a respected physician and vice president of the Monroe NAACP. One night in October 1957, a motorcade of armed Klansmen sped toward Dr. Perry's house on the edge of the black neighborhood. They expected another show of intimidation. Instead, Williams and the Black Armed Guard were ready. They had learned of the plan and set an ambush. The defenders spread out in the dark, hiding in ditches, behind trees, and inside the house itself. When the convoy approached, headlights off, the defenders switched on flashlights and car beams to expose the attackers. Then came a storm of rifle fire. Windshields shattered, tires blew, cars swerved as bullets tore through the night. The Klansmen panicked. Some jumped from their cars and ran into the woods. Others slammed the gas and fled down the road, weaving wildly to escape. The ambush lasted only moments, but it was decisive. The Klan raid had been crushed, not by the state, but by a community that refused to be terrorized. In the aftermath, Monroe's officials could no longer deny reality. Embarrassed, the city council passed a law banning Klan motorcades from the streets. For years, the Klan had driven openly through town, confident that no one would resist them. After that night, they no longer dared. The raids ceased, and the black community experienced a new sense of safety. Their stand had made clear they were not easy targets. The events in Monroe made Williams a national figure. He openly clashed with civil rights leaders who preached nonviolence, arguing that nonviolence was noble but incomplete without the deterrent of self-defense. His bluntness cost him favor with the national NAACP, which suspended him after he insisted that violence could be met with equal force if necessary. The FBI soon marked him as a radical to watch. None of that stopped him. Williams launched a newsletter called The Crusader and later published Negro with Guns, which laid out his philosophy that self-defense was a right and a necessity for survival. Many black readers, weary of living under constant threat, found his arguments both practical and inspiring. Monroe had become proof that the Klan could be beaten back. Williams's influence spread beyond North Carolina. His example resonated with younger activists who would later form the Black Panther Party. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale cited him as a model. Williams himself would eventually be forced to flee the country in 1961 after he was charged in a politically motivated case during further unrest in Monroe. He spent years in exile in Cuba and later China before returning in the 1970s with his name cleared. By then, his legacy was secure. He had changed the conversation about what resistance could mean. The lesson of Monroe was stark. One night in 1957, the Klan came expecting to dominate a black neighborhood as they always had. Instead, they fled in panic, their cars torn up by bullets, their pride shattered. The image of white-robed men scattering under fire from determined black defenders spread far beyond Monroe. It proved that armed courage, when organized and disciplined, could hold back the tide of terror. The Klan had built its power on fear. In Monroe, that power was broken. The people of the town knew it, and so did every Klansman who looked over his shoulder afterward. For once, it was the Klan that felt the fear it had long inflicted on others. By the mid-1960s, the struggle for civil rights had intensified across the South. Nonviolent marches and protests filled the streets, but so did violent backlash from the KKK and their allies. It was in this climate that a new group emerged to stand between peaceful protesters and the Klan's terror. They called themselves the Deacons for Defense and Justice. In black communities under siege, they were known simply as the Deacons. Comprised largely of black military veterans, the Deacons carried guns openly to protect civil rights workers and local residents. These men took the philosophy of self-defense seriously, becoming a protective shield when neither the federal government nor local police would act. The first Deacons chapter formed in late 1964 in Jonesboro, Louisiana. A group of Black Army veterans, including Ernest Thomas and Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick, had grown weary of seeing Klan night riders beat and intimidate black citizens who were fighting for their rights. They organized the Deacons to guard communities and activists directly. Unlike older underground efforts, the Deacons did not hide their activities or their weapons. They patrolled openly with rifles in hand. Chapters quickly spread to other Klan-plagued areas, including Mississippi, Alabama, and more towns in Louisiana. Wherever they went, these men sent a clear message to the Klan. The days of unchecked white terror were ending. One of the most dramatic fronts was Bogalusa, Louisiana, in 1965. Bogalusa was a stronghold of Klan activity, so bold that the Klan had infiltrated both the local police and the sheriff's department. Black citizens could barely step outside to protest without facing armed white vigilantes. Into this atmosphere stepped the Deacons. Under the leadership of men like Charles Sims, a veteran of the Second World War, and Robert Hicks, the Bogalusa chapter built a disciplined defense force. They escorted civil rights leaders, including Corps Director James Farmer, through town to prevent ambushes. At night, Deacon patrols cruised black neighborhoods with lights out, watching for any sign of intruders. For the first time, the black residents of Bogalusa felt that someone was watching over them who had both the will and the means to respond. The Deacons' confrontation with the Klan soon moved from words to actions. In Jonesboro, after the integration of a public library, the Klan retaliated with cross burnings. The Deacons countered with leaflets delivered discreetly to white households, warning that any man caught burning a cross would be killed. The warnings spread quickly, and the cross burnings stopped. The Klan had met a force that spoke in terms they understood, the promise of equal consequences. A few months later, a major clash unfolded in Bogalusa on July 8, 1965. A nonviolent march to City Hall was underway. Black high school students and civil rights activists marched for equal rights, while hostile whites hurled insults and rocks. The mob grew bolder, surrounding the protesters and shoving them. Among the security that day were Deacons, including Henry Austin, a young Air Force veteran. As the mob pressed in, Austin drew his pistol and fired a single warning shot upward. When a white man continued to lunge at the demonstrators, Austin shot him 3 times in the chest. The man survived, as did Austin. But the point was made. Panic swept the mob, which moments earlier had seemed confident. They fled in fear, dragging the injured man away. The demonstrators were saved from what could have turned into a brutal beating or worse. The Deacons had again stopped a Klan-led assault in its tracks. The presence of the Deacons forced the federal government to act. Washington had been reluctant to intervene in small-town violence unless it spiraled out of control. Bogalusa was close to that point. Fearing open warfare between armed black veterans and entrenched Klansmen, the Justice Department invoked Reconstruction-era laws to order local police to protect civil rights workers. For the first time in generations, the federal government stepped directly into a local fight against the Klan. That intervention came because the Deacons had made it clear that if Washington would not act, they would. By late 1965, the effect of the Deacons was undeniable. In Bogalusa and Jonesboro, black citizens felt emboldened to register to vote and integrate public spaces because they knew armed defenders were nearby. The Klan, stripped of its aura of invulnerability, began to wither. FBI reports of the period noted that Klan activity shifted to cowardly acts, such as leafleting or petty vandalism. The open attacks had stopped. The Deacons had terrified the terrorists. They worked in parallel with the nonviolent movement, not in opposition to it. They understood that marches and sit-ins needed protection, even if that protection could not be advertised. Many leaders of nonviolence privately welcomed their presence. Even Martin Luther King Jr., though he would not personally carry arms, was guarded in places like Bogalusa by men who had pledged themselves to the Deacons. This balance between nonviolent protest and armed defense was rarely acknowledged, but was central to survival in many towns. The legacy of the Deacons for Defense and Justice is one of discipline and resolve. They showed that principled use of arms in defense of life could support and strengthen the larger civil rights struggle. Their presence gave black communities a sense of empowerment that they did not have to endure in silence. In towns where the Deacons stood watch, people felt less like passive victims. The Klan was forced to reckon with the possibility of consequence. Over time, as federal civil rights victories accumulated and Klan activity declined, the Deacons faded. By 1968, most chapters had dissolved. Yet for those crucial years, they were guardians of their communities. They terrified the very organization that had long terrorized Black America. They helped ensure that the wheels of progress kept turning. Their story reminds us that the movement was carried forward not only by marches and speeches, but also by the men who held rifles on dark Louisiana nights, standing ready to protect their people. In the heart of Mississippi, perhaps the most dangerous state for black activists in the 1960s, one man became a living legend for staring down the Ku Klux Klan and corrupt officials alike. His name was C.O. Chin. And in the freedom movement of Canton, Mississippi, the mere mention of his name made many Klansmen and racist sheriffs hesitate. If the Klan was an empire of fear, Co. Chin was a one-man rebellion, armed, bold, and unbowed. Chin was not a famous speaker or an outside organizer. He was a local son of Madison County, born and raised there. Standing tall and muscular, he built a modest economic base for himself. He owned a 152-acre farm, ran a nightclub called Club Desire, where artists like B.B. King and James Brown performed, and operated a bootlegging business. In a Jim Crow society designed to keep black men subservient, Chin carved out his independence. He protected that independence and his people with firearms and fearless resolve. By the early 1960s, Canton had become a focal point for civil rights work. Organizers from CORE and SNCC arrived to register black voters and push back against segregation. They were met with arrests, beatings, shootings, and open threats from the White Citizens Council and the Klan. In that hostile climate, they found an unlikely guardian in Co. Chin. On many nights when mass meetings were held in black churches, he sat outside in his pickup truck, a shotgun across his lap, watching over those inside. Volunteers recalled that he also assigned armed men to escort civil rights workers to and from rural meeting sites. His presence gave activists in Canton the chance to operate with less fear than in other parts of Mississippi. The local white establishment soon realized that Chin was serious. He responded to threats with force. One incident inside the Madison County Courthouse became part of local lore. During a hearing for a jailed civil rights worker, the sheriff began shoving and insulting black attendees. Chin stepped between the sheriff and the protesters. He revealed the pistol holstered at his side. The sheriff, known for his temper and power, backed down. Later, he admitted grudgingly to his deputies that, in the county, there was only one man he considered his equal in toughness, and that man was Co. Chin. Stories of Chin's actions spread quickly through Canton's black community. He was known to patrol the town at night, watching for Klan riders. One night, white extremists came to his farm with the intention of harming him. Chin confronted them at his fence line with rifle in hand. Shots were exchanged, and the attackers fled into the night, never to return. Each time he was tested, he held his ground. Activists in the area often joked that every white man in Canton knew not to cross him. His very name became a shield for those who organized under constant threat. Because of Chin, Canton achieved victories that might not have been possible otherwise. Voter registration drives advanced with less bloodshed than in surrounding counties. Civil rights workers were able to go door to door to mobilize voters without the same level of interference. In 1964, when Chin organized a boycott of segregationist-owned stores, the usual terror tactics of bomb threats and shootings did not escalate as they often did elsewhere. The knowledge that Chin and his men were watching discouraged many who might have attacked. Chin's defiance came at a cost. White authorities and business leaders conspired to bring him down financially. They had him arrested on trumped-up charges, pressured suppliers to cut ties with him, and eventually stripped him of his nightclub and much of his land. He went from prosperity to hardship, but he refused to be broken. He continued to speak at meetings, urging black residents to vote and to remain strong. Even when stripped of much of what he had built, he stayed in Canton. It was his home, and he intended to remain there. By his presence alone, Chin altered the balance of power in Madison County. The Klan's most effective weapon, fear, lost its force in Canton. Activists who remember the Mississippi movement often recall those who lost their lives, the churches that were burned, and the brutality endured. They also remember Co. Chin, the man who kept watch and made survival possible. His courage meant that some who might have died lived to continue the struggle. Chin's story is a reminder of the hidden layer of the civil rights movement, the layer of black self-defense that allowed nonviolent activism to survive in hostile places. Not every victory came from turning the other cheek. Some came because a determined man with a weapon was willing to say that enough was enough. The Klan wanted Mississippi's black citizens paralyzed by fear. Chin made sure that in Canton it was the white supremacists who walked more carefully. His life embodied the lesson that one person's resolve can rally a community and hold even the most entrenched hatred at bay. In the record of those who stood up to the Klan, C.O. Chin stands tall, a man whose strength carved out safety in one of the most dangerous landscapes of the freedom struggle. Thank you for staying with us through this history. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Black Culture Unlocked.
All right, Black Culture Unlocked. Shout out to those. Shout out to them for doing what they do. And man, good stuff. Good stuff, honestly. You know, what can I say about this particular video? Magnificently done. The information was excellent. You know, they had us believing that it was always a march, always a chant, and you know, you just sit there quietly, take the abuse, and others will feel sorry for you, and then they'll help you eventually. Like that's literally what they gave us to look forward to, and that's absolutely crazy because it had to be some brothers, some during these times that was just fed up with this foolishness. Like there's no way in the earth you can treat people like the way we was treated and everybody was just complicit with it. No problem. Oh, so that's what they doing to us? Okay. Like, nah. Somewhere it was men with backbones that said, hell no. Them mugs ain't coming through here. Them jokers ain't coming through here. They come through here, they're gonna have problems. And lo and behold, we get groups of them stating it. They come through here, they're gonna have to deal with us. And that put them right where they need to be. So praises to the Abba for these brothers and for this story, for this brother putting this story together and making it as it needed to be told. This is an important part of our history, and not just take your abuse and go sit in the corner. You know, I'm sure that some of our people did that, but there were others of our people that would say, I ain't doing that. And if you think you're gonna put your hands on me, you think you're gonna mess with my people, then we're gonna have a problem. And that's exactly how it should be. I want to show y'all something with this particular video. I don't normally do this. Give me one moment here. All right. This is the book of Leviticus, chapter number 19, and verse number 16. I'm going to put it on the screen here. All right, verse 16. It says, you shall not go up and down as a talebearer among your people, neither shall you stand against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. He says, neither shall you stand against the blood of your neighbor. What does it mean to stand against the blood of your neighbor? What that means, simply and plainly, is that something happens to your neighbor, to your brother, to your people, and you stand by, idly by, and watch it happen. You do absolutely nothing, especially when you are an able-bodied man. You do absolutely nothing while this happens. You seen it happen. You knew it was going to happen. They said they was coming to do it, and you just stood there and watched. The commandment says, neither shall you stand against the blood of your neighbor. So when your neighbor is in trouble, understand here, this is Leviticus. This is Leviticus. This is the Torah. This is the instruction given unto the children of Israel as they got ready to go into their land. So they were getting ready to go into their land, and they were getting ready to operate from that perspective. So we're going into the land, and guess what? If Amalek coming here, and Amalek, I walk out of my place, and Amalek got my neighbor with a sword to him, or he beating him, I'm not gonna just walk by and see what he's doing and be like, I didn't see that, and keep walking. That's way out of line. That is way out of line. The Most High said, you shall not stand against the blood of your neighbor. So you don't just sit by idly and watch your neighbor be heckled, be destroyed, be strung up, or anything bad happen to your neighbor, and you just let it be so. So these brothers was right on time. Their operation was completely what it should be. The fact that they took arms to protect their neighbors, to protect their people, to protect their brothers and sisters and children in their community, that's exactly what they should have been doing. And the Most High smiled upon that thing. That made him happy to see that happening. Indeed. So all praises to the Most High for these brothers throughout this history. Keep this in mind when you watch this. Understand, we can't live for ourselves. We represent a whole nation. We represent a people. Not to say you got to put a beret on your head. There's nothing that's not written anywhere. But understand, if you want to get organized, you want to protect your community, you got a problem with people coming into your community, you want to give some protection, by all means, do so. That last brother, he did it by himself. He did it by himself. So again, all praises to the Most High. We'll go ahead and close this on out. I hope you're learning from this as we go through these. And I don't just put these up just because they look good or they sound good. I put them up because this is something that we need to be aware of. All right? We do this for a specific purpose. Why do we do it? Romans chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Ha'abba, to the Father, for Israel, is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people restored to the prominence that the Most High have promised to give us again. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith and the belief in Hamashiach, the Messiah. Secondly, Ecclesiastes chapter number 12 and verse 13. Let us hit the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am Akazaki Yahu, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai. That's praises to Yahweh, who is the name of the Heavenly Father, in the name of his beloved Son, Yahweh Shai, who you might associate with the JC character. It's not the JC character. His name is Yahweh Shai. Some people may pronounce it as Yehoshua or Yahusha or Yeshua. That's fine. No problem with their pronunciation. But understand that it's not the JC character. It's not the white man JC. All right. This is Hamashiach, the Messiah. Okay. He is a Negro, so-called Negro, not a white boy, not a so-called white boy. He is a so-called Negro, a black man, a man of power, a man of ability, and a man of what is that word? A man of no nonsense. There's a word that describes it. It evades me right now. Austere. He's an austere man. That's what I was trying to think of it. My goodness, all praises to the Most High. Hamashiach is an austere man. He's not that white man JC. All right, that's not what it is. That's not who he is. So don't get him confused, because he's not going to be pleased when he returns. For all of you who had this image of this white boy JC in your mind, thinking that this was him, when you see him, he's gonna make you shake in your boots. That's how scary he's gonna be. But I know what he looked like, because the scripture teaches us how he looks when he comes back, how he looks when he was gone, how he looked when he was on the earth. We have an understanding of that. Plus, he was a Hebrew Israelite from the tribe of Yehuda, the same as Yaak right here. Most likely, I'm from the tribe of Yehuda as well. So we have that in common. And also, it said his voice, he had the voice of many waters. So not to be trifled with. All praises to the Abba. But the Messiah, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth, I say shalom wa baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, shalom, family. Praise you, Abba.